Back in 2021, when I was working as an engineering manager, our team was building a lot of software from scratch. At the time, we decided that it would be best to build a couple of pieces of software that are going to automate the work that we did, and that was going to help us in the future. During my spare time, I decided to build a GitHub action to version our code. The GitHub action would be able to deal with patches, minor versions, major versions, and using the semantic versioning model. The goal was to automate this and to make it as simple as possible for us to whenever we release a new feature, we didn't have to worry about what was going to be the next version and no one would forget how to version their code. I decided to make that part open source. And one of the best feelings that I got was when someone contributed to my project. It's like a feeling of what you did was useful and people are using it, and also they want to make it grow because there's some utility on it. Today I speak with Farshad, a senior software engineer and a longtime colleague responsible for creating the application Wait4It. Wait4It is a lightweight tool designed to test service readiness and exit gracefully once the checks are completed. It currently has over 1.1 million Docker pulls and rising, and it's currently in version 13. It's completely open source and can be used by anyone. We talk about Farshad's journey as a software engineer and what got him interested in the field, starting with Autorun, moving into PHP, and more recently working with Go and Kotlin. It's an interesting conversation and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to Away from the Keyboards. And now back to Farshad. Tell us about your journey.
That was a journey. I think I got my first computer when I was 14, if I recall correctly, when I was 14 years old. And internet was not a thing, at least where I was living. I think the first time I got access to internet, Yahoo was a big thing during that time. Google was a new name on the market. And accessing internet was quite expensive. Where I was living, it was not something that you have it at home. Then I was playing around and I was quite curious. So I kind of messed a lot with my hardware. I lost the hard disk due to multiple installation of Windows. So I wanted to just see how it works. Then I think the journey began one day. I was putting a disk in on my drive and tried to install a game. And then I saw a weird application coming up with different buttons, shiny buttons, and music. And then I was like, okay, what is it? And that was the moment the term Autorun application came into the picture. So I learned about it. I said, okay, this is a fancy stuff. So you put it there, something comes up, and then you can put something in there, whatever you want. So at that point of time, there were two applications mainly used to build Autorun applications. One of them very famous during that time. It was called Multimedia Builder, or in short, it's called MMB. And it was like a WYSIWYG editor, so you could put things in it and then define some actions in it. And if you want some more advanced thing to be done when you click a button or something happens, you could have wrote your script. And I tried to learn it, but there was no documentation. And again, internet was not a thing for me. So that was a failed attempt in the first time. I could have built the small things, but like building an application that does something, that was not possible. So after a while, I learned about another application. So I got it, installed it. It was called Autoplay Media Studio. It's still similar like a WYSIWYG editor. It was a bit fancier, and it has a really good help embedded into the application. So there was tons of document there. And I started reading there. And it was easier to build a bit of a complex applications. I had no idea what software engineering or like how to write codes. So I just began to connect the dots together. And at some point, for example, I needed a bit of a more complex interaction. So I started going through the documentation and say, okay, there is a concept like, what if I want to do something? And then, oh yeah, there's a possibility if I write if and then put something in front of it, then it actually evaluates it and goes into the different branches of the code execution. So here and there, I started learning it, building different weird stuff, most of them useless things, but it actually helped me to get an idea of how I can build an application. With the different version of this software came different capabilities. At some point, you could connect to a SQL database, whether it was a SQLite or MySQL, and like calling an external service like HTTP call, getting their response and do something about it. So it became a bit complex and complex. I think I was around 17, 18. I was building a couple of stuff for some local businesses around that was not paying, but it was wonderful for me. So I loved building things. And during that time, I think when I was 18, 19, internet was a bit more accessible to me. I didn't still have it at home, but there were tons of places that you could go pay some money and get access to computer with internet. So like for me, it was like bringing a USB stick, trying to download everything possible during that time with the slow internet and go back home and start reading things. That was the time. During that time, I got familiar with a group of people. They were having hosting company. There were 2 or 3 people there. They had their own company. It was a small hosting company back in the days. They're still operating like after 20 years probably. So I could say they were successful in their business. But that was the first time I learned about PHP and like CMS concepts. So, and then that was the first time, okay, these websites are built not from scratch, probably on top of something. And it was written in PHP. So what the hell is PHP? I found a book. It was written in Persian by some guy, published it for free in the internet, and was describing how like the syntax works, how you can write the hello world. He was teaching PHP for, I think it was 120 pages or something. So I started reading that, trying to run it, and then I learned, okay, how do you run a PHP code? And that was the time I used my dial-up internet connection, at most 4 kilobytes per second. So it was quite slow. And I tried to download easy PHP so I can run my code and see how it works. And it took me an hour. I never forget it. It took me an hour to download, I think, 16, 17 megabytes of file. It's weird, probably in 2025, but it was quite a journey to download 20 megabytes of file, at least those days. So that's when I started learning PHP. I started to build a couple of things again for people around me, and reading more books about how to develop applications, reading a couple of books about like PHP 5, the changes they've made. And at the time, PHP 5.3 was introduced. They also introduced the concept of a namespace, so the language became a bit more mature. I think there was a specific book I really enjoyed at that time, kind of uplifted me. It was a book from O'Reilly, PHP Advanced Programming or something. I think it was from O'Reilly. So I started reading it, learn more things, trying to build the stuff. And I was a student in the university at that time. And I was building different things to just either earn money or learn something. And then I met some guys who were building a small social network similar to Twitter, but like back in the days, it was just targeting a niche audience for specific people around the town. During that time, if you recall, most of the database, when they started with the user table, the identifiers was like just numbers, right? So it starts from 1. So the 1 was user ID 1 was the owner of the website, and I was 873, so I was an 173 user in the system. So I started helping them to build different things to add to the website, this social network. That was a great experience and a lot of experiments. We didn't have money to pay for like server administration, so that was also the time. Okay, I think we were 3 people at that time developing the website, and said, okay, we need to learn it. So we started learning about Linux. The first time I got a VPS to just try something out, the first thing I was asking, like, how do I connect to it? There is no interface. And okay, now I need to learn about terminals and like SSH. So I started learning about how to maintain a Linux server because we had issues, and we either had to pay a lot of money to someone who already know and fix it for us, or we had to learn it by ourselves. And the problem was the social media was just a fun project. We were, and it was not generating revenue. And I think all of us were doing freelance works during that time. So it was just like a fun project on the side to do some experiments. If we learned something new, we tried it there. And it was growing slowly and steadily. But again, we were a bunch of engineers, so we didn't know how to do marketing or how to generate revenue out of it. Then it went on and on for a couple of years. I think in 2012 or 13, we shut it down and we started a couple of projects with those people and some new people we met along the way during the years. So with all we've learned, we tried to build the products, and we had other people from like non-technical background to help us to build the product. We spent, I think, then 2-3 years to build these things, and probably you've guessed it, they both failed because again, there were a lot of things we didn't know. We spent too much time on the engineering side of the things rather than trying to bring the product to the market, see how it behaves. So during this time, I was living in north of Iran. Then I moved to Tehran, the capital city, and started working for a company for a couple of months. It was not a good experience. And then I moved to another company, 4 years old startup, and they were doing different services, but mainly it was similar to Uber. And they were providing services to in many cities, not the whole country. When I joined them, I was the 11th or 12th backend developer they had. So it was quite a small team when I started there, and that was a very interesting journey. We did a lot of good stuff there. So when I joined them, we were around like the technical part of the company was around 70-80 people, because like we were having like Android team developing the Android application, the iOS team, PWA team, and the backend, also infrastructure and stuff because everything was in house. And when I left them, we had around, I think, 60-70 just backend engineers. So the company quite expanded during the almost 2 years I was there. And I moved to the Netherlands in December 2019. Started working for a company here. They were providing infrastructure to many different customers. I was developing their DNS application. So their DNS platform, I was adding stuff to there, and I was still doing PHP. And at that point, I was quite tired of the language itself. So I was looking for different things. And I think in 2021, I joined IKEA and kind of changed the whole stack of development. So I think that was the first time I also met you. And yeah, from that day on, we are doing a bit of everything. So far in the past 4 years, that was quite an also interesting journey here. We've built tons of things, but now it's not PHP anymore, so it's Java and Kotlin these days.
So never again you touch a line of code of PHP.
It's weird, but I still follow up the changes on the trend in the language and like in a couple of famous framework it has. And it's like, how do you say it? It's a hate and love relationship with it. So I still follow it, how it's going on. Okay, what are you doing now? What has changed? And I say, okay. And then I also say, thank God I'm not doing that anymore. I'm just tired of it. But it's a matter of personal preference. So
yeah, because what is it? The majority of the web is on top of WordPress, which is on top of PHP.
Indeed.
Because it used to be the stack that everyone used, the LAMP, SHAMP, WAMP.
Also, it was very fast to build the stuff and like prototype stuff. It was quite easy. And I remember when I started, it was super easy to host the website and super cheap to host a website using PHP, because you just like there were shared hosting that provided things out of the box. I think it was with cPanel or direct admin that you could just pay a small price monthly or yearly, and then you could have access to 100 megabytes of storage to put your code there. And it was funny because it was super fast to build the stuff with it. You could have scaled it pretty well. I remember a lot of big companies also were using it today to deliver their products.
I remember cPanel and using it also to build a website. And I remember the first interview I went and I got rejected for was as a PHP developer. This was still in college time, and I was looking into a part-time. So there was a part-time in a university department of another college. And I remember going to have an interview with the guy in a cafe in the morning. And he was just talking a little bit about PHP. And I remember telling him, yeah, I know a little bit of PHP, but I think the important part is I know how to code. One can learn syntax very easily. And the guy said, no, PHP is extremely complex and powerful language. One does not just learn PHP by the syntax. And I never looked into PHP ever again.
PHP was a trend, at least during some time back in the days in Iran. Still, a lot of company build their softwares with it. I think in the past couple of years, Laravel also got quite famous and extensively used there. So still, it's a big deal. I'm not sure, but it was kind of like things, okay, start using it to just begin with. Then we were using PHP, then we created a lot of small services, microservices with Go. So it became kind of a hybrid stack for their partly PHP, partly Go. And I've seen this trend in different places also. So it still works. So
Yeah, it's not stupid if it works, right?
yeah, indeed.
And it's not the worst performing language in the world. Like, if you want to build a website and you don't know JavaScript, probably the easiest one that you can learn nowadays to build a website. You're basically writing in English, so it's quite easy to understand. But now your favorite one is Go, right?
I like Go for its simplicity. Some people says it's a bit verbose, but I still like it for building a small services or small things. And I know a lot of people with Java or PHP background may not like the syntax or like how it works, but I see it pretty useful. So
Yeah, it's so useful that Microsoft now is changing the backend of TypeScript to Go.
indeed.
Microsoft started using the language of the biggest competitor that they have.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing I was just discussing with a colleague a couple of days ago. Okay. Oh, okay, so your systems are going to be executed by Go. That was a fun discussion.
Go now becomes an integral part of their stack,
Probably they don't need to touch it, but it will be there.
lurking in the background.
Exactly.
And when did the passion for developing open source software started?
It was started during the pandemic. At the time I moved to the Netherlands, I think after 2 or 3 months the pandemic started, everything was shut down. For me, it was living in Netherlands was like I am in the house. I go to Albertine to buy stuff for the next week because it's still scary to go out, so I don't do it on a daily basis. I do it once a week and go back home. We work through the day, and then it's just you need to wait for the next day to just either work, or in the weekend you're just looking at the walls watching a movie. It got pretty boring after a while, and I'm kind of person I enjoyed spending time doing nothing or spending time at home. So all my favorite things happens at home. I read the books, I play the games, I watch movies, and then it got boring. So it was pretty hard time. The idea of the Wait4It began, I think one of the last project I worked in that Uber-like company back in Iran. We had different teams during that time. To just put a little context, we had different teams, a backend team developing all the APIs and stuff, the client teams developing the Android, iOS, different applications. And we had a separate QA team during that time. So every feature from all of these teams, it should have been tested by them. And then when they gave us thumbs up, then we would have deployed. And deploying also was a bit hard, depends on what you're releasing. And when the teams got bigger, so we started with like 10, 12 backend engineers when I joined them. Almost a year after, we were around 60, 70 backend engineers. Also, the other teams grew as well. So we had an issue, and I was testing the features because every time we had some pre-configured dev environment, and those dev environment tend to break a lot easy. So during like 5 days a week, 4 days they were not working, someone had to look into it. And normally, since it requires a lot of data to be available in those environments and to be available correctly, and every time someone was playing with something, they would have broken it, and then they didn't know how to fix it. So it was a mess, and it was getting harder and harder to make major releases or like big features. And again, you're working in a highly competitive area, so you know when something is not working right. So it was me and 2 or 3 other engineers from other teams who had some knowledge about how all the systems are working. So we sat together for 2 months. Probably during that time, we were working around 12 hours a day. And at that time, we had a separate cloud team that were providing us OpenShift. So what we did was to make some sort of automation that if you wanted to test a new feature, basically a branch in the Git, it would have developed the whole ecosystem in 10 minutes to the cloud, everything set up, everything seeded, like the database is set up, the information is already there. So you could have just started like testing the feature. I don't remember exactly the numbers, but when we rolled it out and fixed most of the issues, we kind of unblocked the QA team completely, and I think we were able to deliver the features 30% faster comparing to the previous time. And the Wait4It idea, at that time we did it with a bash script, so it was nothing like this. I created the project I think in 2020, and I was already in Netherlands, but we had to, since many containers coming up at once, and some of them required a database pre-filled with the data, and I needed the database service. Since it's a container just coming up, I needed the database to be ready. So we created some bash script to wait for the database to be ready to accept the connection, and then we allowed the container to come up and start seeding the data and doing the rest of the orchestration happens. So that was a bash script back then. And during the pandemic, I was sitting there and saying, okay, what can I do? What should I do? And like, I wasn't doing Go for a long time, so I missed the language. And we were using PHP in that company, and it was an old version of Symfony. So there were tons of things that requires to do like a manual wiring. It was quite boring for me. So I needed something to do. And I was thinking, okay, why not build the same bash script a little bit better with Go, and let's see what happens. I have nothing else to do. I cannot go out. So that was the time I started reading more about the changes, like in the past year or two in the Go, and started building this application. And then it became fun. So I don't remember exactly how many services I was supporting back then. I think it was in October 1st, 2021. That I also called for, like in my Twitter account, that, hey, is there anyone who wants to contribute to the project? And some of my friends made some patches to the code, made some contributions, and the project was live. I was I was just making sure all the dependencies are up to date, the Docker image is up to date. And I think it was around September 2024 or something, I noticed that more and more people are using the Docker image. So I think before, like last year around here, was like 100K of pulls. And during the past 10 months, a lot of people are using it. I don't know who exactly is using it. Please reach out if you're hearing this. But now it's almost 1 million pull in Docker Hub. So that was quite an interesting journey for me. And I've been wanting to publish this in like as a Linux package for like Debian and like so, but never like got the reason for it. But now I have it probably. So probably at some point in the coming months, I spend more time on the project itself. But it was a fun project for me, and kind of when you're not doing Go on your daily job, that was my side project to do it.
And if you are able to push it into the repositories of Debian and Ubuntu by getting the same package manager, then maybe it can be integrated with GitHub Actions as well, as the runners are Ubuntu.
Yeah, by default they are. Yeah, that might be a good approach indeed.
It could open some crazy doors that you are not thinking yet. So
True.
That could be a nice one.
Yep, and recently I've got some feedback to add support for more services. I just need to spend a little time to add those as well. But again, it's fun that I see a small project I built 5 years ago. People are using it. It's getting used and useful.
Yeah, and have you been receiving a lot of contributions?
Not recently, because mostly in the past year actually, it was mostly in the maintenance mode, so making sure all the dependencies are up to date, building the project time to time. But there are a couple of issues open in the project right now, so if someone contribute to it, that would be great. And if not, I'll try to make some room and actually develop those things.
And how easy it is to manage an open source project at that scale?
It's a small project, so that was not a big problem. People time to time come with different ideas. Some of them I've accepted. Some of them I had to reject them because they were changing the things from scratch, and it was like becoming a bit of a different project. So I already asked them, hey, you can just fork it out and do whatever you think best. But it's not a big project, so not much of a hassle. But I can imagine like big projects in open source, they can get a bit tricky. Actually, you see that like they're making comments. Okay, make sure you read the issues before you open an issue. That was not a problem for me. So not much an experience on that part, probably.
Have you already put some automation on managing the issues in GitHub?
For this project, no. I'm doing things manually until I get bored of doing things manually. Then that's I put in, some automations there. I think the last automation was it was missing some tests, and since this project is basically checking the connection, there's not much you can do with the unit testing. So I had to do some sort of integration testings. I found a bit of a weird way to make it work, but it's working quite well. So every time there is a dependency update on the libraries that I'm using to test, to check the connections on different services, at least I can rely on those tests. I think I added it in 2023 or early 2024, and that was the latest changes probably.
Thanks, Farshad, for being a part of this podcast and coming here and having this chat with me. For you, the listener, again, thank you for listening to our podcast. You know where to find us in all the socials. And if you know anyone that wants to be a guest, please contact us. Give them a nudge. Until next time, this is Away from the Keyboards.